Hello. How are you?
Shall we just do that?
Yeah, lovely to see you. You look fantastic. I'm very well. Yeah, you look very well. Yeah, yeah. Have you been carrying on sort of as normal, or yeah, yeah,
When everybody was waiting for the shop,
yeah.
I did all my clients just went, oh, it's the end.
You're happy?
And then they realised that they were shut.
If I thought of one thing before I came, was that if it turns into a cocktail party, and what's happening?
I found some of your strategic stuff for us recently. Yeah, no, it's really useful. I mean, yeah.
I know.
Well, anyway, yeah, I feel like so many wheels are being reinvented over the years, and actually, that it needs to, because Wakefield is going through a whole other process, which obviously you were involved with, you know, many years ago. Yeah. But actually, there seem to be sort of context at the end of the tunnel for this work. Yeah, I think they're actually going to have a strategy, and they're going to spend money on art because they've talked about it for so long. It's painful. Am I?
Hello.
How much do you mind me sitting down here? Because I'm much
Hello,
more
hello.
comfortable for
Is
the
it
time
working?
if I'm not. I'm just physically more comfortable. So I can still look up and smile. To has he appeared?
He's not on video. Tom, can you hear us? Yeah, I think we need to start the introduction, and he will join.
It's my way of doing things.
Yeah. Dear Tom.
Hi.
Oh, I never got my T-shirt.
We'll get one for you, buddy. Hi.
Julia. Hello, Tom. I'm out of shot, but I'm doing a brief introduction, and I want to say hello to you, and thank you so much for doing this, as I'm going to say hello to the two very distinguished friends and colleagues who are on the podium. Richard Wentworth, who's obviously seated, and will roam, as he so chooses, throughout the talk. He's also got an amazing array of objects, which I'm dying to get my hands on, and I hope we'll be in the incredible privilege of seeing all of them at some point of this evening. And of course, Clare, who I'm an enormous admirer of, the Director of Programs at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, who's going to moderate the conversation between Tom and Richard. You would have to be somehow taken leave of your senses if you don't realize that we are sitting gloriously above Tom's exhibition. So I love this idea that we're a kind of thought bubble above your show, Tom. And if anybody has any questions about the exhibition, they can simply run downstairs, have a look, and come back up again. Tom and I had the very great privilege of talking one morning early, 6 o'clock New York time, which he was so generous about in every single way. He's a wonderful artist whose exhibition here presents new work, some objects not seen in the UK before. And I think particularly there's something about exploring his work as we come out of COVID, when the everyday is something extraordinary, not least because we haven't seen the everyday for a very long time, which is a dear friend, and I've known him for 30 years. I need say no more.
40?
Even better. Okay, enough of me and more of you. Claire, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
Shall
you,
we
Julia.
Lovely to see you.
Tom, Tom, can you hear us first of all? Is that
I can.
good?
I
Good,
can.
great. Okay. I think we're going to be talking quite a lot about material and the way things join and the way things are constructed. But first of all, I thought we might kick off with just asking you guys, because this is really a conversation between you, asking you why this enduring conversation continues and what it is that you find. I mean, I'm sure there are many things within your friendship, but particularly about material and the way that materials are formed and how they connect to the kind of period of industrialization that we live in. Do you want to kick off?
Why don't you tell the lady how we met?
Sure.
Or tell everybody. How did we meet? Because that's already going to take us.
Claire, shall I just tell you how Richard and I met? And so I was a student at the AA and pretty ambivalent student. I didn't know what I was doing, but I attended a lecture that Richard delivered. I was Making, Doing, Getting By series, which in my view is kind of very much what internet has become for a lot of us. He kind of predated a lot of the thinking that I've used Instagram for. Anyway, long story short, at the end of the lecture, I said, fuck this. I don't want to be an architect. I want to do what this guy's doing. And I approached him. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
No?
Yes, we can.
They can.
Really well.
And we started a conversation that's continued for 35 years or something about making. And there are many things that we could talk about and that we will get into, but I think the fundamental thing that you'll see in these sculptures and that you'll see in our conversation is that it's been, 35,000 years since man's made stuff, right? If you look at Jomon pottery or cave painting, and we're gotten to the point where there's no evidence that the thing has been made, like the best made thing ever, right? The iPhone has no evidence that the thing is made, and then some of the dials and the way that we interact with it is heavily engaged with skeuomorphism, where the analog gauges are represented digitally. So the connection of things made has been removed, and the sculptures that I make, that Richard makes, the things that we're interested in, made by artists and made by industry or whatever, are the things that tell the story of how materials go together. Whether that's screws or caulk or fancy joinery or whatever. And yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking with it.
Well, and I'm just going to butt in because interestingly, I mean, we only met on Zoom very recently. We've never met in real life. But actually, when I was searching for an email from Richard, who I have known for some years, I found a thread of emails where Richard was looping Richard was looping me into a conversation with you about material. And you were really, really buzzing because you'd just bought a pneumatic kind of gun of some sort, and you were really, and you said it's just great because I can do things really quickly. I can, that is very immediate, and I can pull these forms together. So, and even over the last couple of weeks, what we've seen is a dialogue, or I've been witness to a dialogue between you, which is very much about kind of elisions and fractures and the unmade and the made. Do you want to pick up on that, Richard?
Yeah, it's funny to hear you, Tom, because I realise if we were locked in a room together, we wouldn't have much problem we would talk for 24 hours probably. But I think that the tension in today in the unreality of talking to this screen with you projected to me, is that I am so anxious about the extemporized. And by that, I mean, we're not going to be here forever. I can relax because in an hour's time, we won't have to be talking like this. We might even make a telephone call, which will feel substantial, even substantive. And I think the thing that I've got out of this show is a sort of double anxiety, which is to do with your confidence. And I think your confidence is running on the adjacent railway to my lip biting at this moment. So yesterday I heard that not your heat wave, but not far away, was a 1 in 1,000 year event. And we're all implicated in it. And I have absolutely nothing righteous to say. So I noticed as I've been speaking, I might slightly start to sound a little bit Margaret Atwood. What I want to do is to try and trade my anxiety with your confidence, because the show, I don't see much doubt in the show. There's one piece of mischief which I want to get to, and I think you know where it is. Or there's one very definite bit of mischief, but which we can come to. But just tell me a little bit about the confidence of making, invoking Brancusi, who actually technically you could never have met. I think I could have met him. I mean, I think he died before you were born. But what he means, his mythology, you know, that ridiculous idea that he's supposed to have walked from Romania to Paris. Maybe he did, but none of us were there.
Well, I choose to believe in the mythology. I think it's more important to why let the facts get in the way of telling a good story. And Brancusi's I don't know if you want to call it machismo, but connection with things made, and that he operated a big 12-foot long saw by himself in those photos. I think he's kind of the prototype for David Smith. I know, Claire, you and I were talking about this a little offline. In the cult of personality is something that you can't ignore, whether it's Brancusi or David Smith or Picasso or Andy Warhol. And it's important also to connect with the hand of the individual. I do feel the Margaret Atwood every day. We are living in a dystopia. The singularity is not near, it is now. We are subjects of the AI. We are working for it. But that's in a way a conversation that is around us, but I want to focus on the things that make me an individual. You know, when I took a picture of that cappuccino with a beautiful flower in the foam and posted on Instagram 5 years ago, when I first got Instagram, I was really disappointed to see that 40,000 other people that minute had posted that same picture in their lives, and I had lost my things that made me special. And the thing that you describe as confidence is, for me, is just my willingness to celebrate my flaws, the flaws of my shitty craftsmanship, the evidence of it that I exist. And I think it's the thing that artists have over industry, is our ability to say, hey, I am somebody, I exist on this plane, because you know, Facebook understands us as not as customers, but as employees, because we provide the data that advertisers pay for. So, you know, we are working for them. All of this comes from my sorry, Richard, from my attempt at one point early, like a dozen years ago, 20 years ago, I tried to make a perfect Judd-like object and failed, and it was all the flaws that were more interesting. So that's why I leaned into it.
Can you describe? I love the three-word expression, a Judd-like object.
Well, okay,
can we hear more about?
Yeah, so Donald Judd is like in a lot of ways the Christ figure of our collective movements because of his like perfectionism. You know, we all want to know what Judd was like as a lover and a human being, because his objects are simultaneously so warm and industrial, showing materials that they're made of, yet miraculously devoid of evidence of their construction. Like, you know, you don't see screws, you don't see joinery, you don't see errors in anything. They're flawless. I even used Bernstein Brothers, Judd fabricators, once when I was a metal worker doing a storefront installation, and I got the parts back from Bernstein and they were all crooked. And I said, "Hey, Bernstein, what's up with these? I saw your receipt in Mel Bachner's book that Donald Judd contributed to, and your address is on it. And I found you made this thing." And he's like, "Yeah, Tom, because I only charge you $1,500. But if you want, you know, Don, I had to do it 4 times over to make it look like I didn't do anything." And I thought that was, yeah. So multiply times 4. And you can ask any artist, you know, if you want to do something perfectly, it takes you 4 times the first time. That's like the general math from my experience in anything technical. And so, you know, without getting too into Judd, but the other part, of course, is the formal compositions of reduced form of things that were so mute or dumb in a world of complexity. And you see those parts in my sculptures. I don't have the courage, balls, confidence to do something as reduced as Judd or as Duchamp. I always have to put all this work into it. That's my own insecurity.
Tom, we're looking at this steel leaf blower as you're speaking.
Yeah.
And you've made a connection between this piece and Brancusi's Bird in Space.
Yeah.
Was that a kind of a happy marriage that was accidental, or was it something that was intent? Did you have that intent when you decided to take this particular form, which obviously has a lot of connotations around social status and consumerism? But what came first, I suppose, is the question.
Well, the form is very specific, and I think Duchamp said to one of his students, if you're going to put a bar of soap in your art as a ready-made, make sure it's the right bar of soap. And she said to him, "Well, how will I know what the right bar of soap is for my collage?" And he said, "Don't worry, you'll know." And that intuition is everything, is understanding and accepting yourself so you can make that intuitive decision. For me, that steel leaf blower was a gift from my wife, and I wanted it so badly. I was so excited to have that leaf blower because steel is kind of understood as the best chainsaw maker. Like if you have a steel brand chainsaw, they're German. They're like it's like a status symbol among woodsmen. And I wanted a leaf blower, even though I don't have leaves in my life. I live in New York City, so leaves don't exist. But I really wanted this thing as an object. So it sat around for 3 years as just a thing that I wanted, until I understood it as, I just turned it on end. It was leaning up against the wall one day, and I said, "Oh yeah, it's Bird in Space, and it's an Etruscan figure, you know, and so many other things." And so it kind of, every single thing in the show, and this is maybe the best example that you could pick, Claire, is something that I had have a authentic connection with, something that means something in my life, something that is like, you know, even right now we're looking at this
Tom,
bottle rack that belonged to Robert Rauschenberg, who bought it from Marcel Duchamp.
Can we pause for a minute? Because you got to the punchline quite early.
Oh.
And I've got I've got some junior slopes that I want to go up. So I'm going to pass around some pictures, which maybe, as it's become very complicated, the camera person might be able to capture at some point. They involve the misuse of Lego by somebody who would appear to know what they're doing. I think this is a still from name of film, Parasite, which I can't believe everybody here hasn't seen.
I've seen it.
You'll see them in a minute. Something I'm not going to tell you what it is, something which is self-evident, and something which is drop dead gorgeous, which I found by accident, which I would probably have made into a postcard. So they're going around now, and people will gaze at them because people do that. They look at images. But I'm holding a picture, which is the nearest thing I could do in sort of real space, or, you know, the nearest I could get to a kind of Brancusi touch, which is a 1990 photograph in Kosovo by a good friend of mine who you might know, Lala Meredith Vula. And the photograph is unbelievably traditional in some ways because it's so brilliantly composed. I'm sure when this is edited, this can be done differently, but I'm just going to describe something which is kind of, in a way, I object to describing it because that's not what looking is. And if there's something funny about us all being here, you can feel how lumpy it is to sort of talk about the meniscus in the glass of water. Anyway, there's I would guess it's a mum with a baby, young baby, raising the baby up in the way that mothers do. There are corn cobs on some sort of tarpaulin. There's the modesty of a concrete roof that I doubt anyone here has ever made for themselves, but I mustn't presume. So modest.
Rhodey, can we get in there? Rhodey,
Sorry?
can you get in there with a camera and just and go into Richard so I can see what's going on, what he's talking about?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
He wants to.
No, I was just asking Rhodey
Okay.
to go.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I can actually read backwards because I'm so sophisticated. And on the roof, there are two people and some washing, but, and here we go, gosh, this is quite spooky. There's my finger. There's a haystack, and the haystack has a tarpaulin on to keep the water out, bearing a word that we all recognize, Vodafone. And in the foreground is whatever they're called. How do I get to it?
Dish.
Yes, thank you. A satellite dish. Thank you so much. This is quite the strangest thing I've ever done. Anyway, I'm going to pass it round because clearly it's 50 years after anything that Brancusi would ever have seen, but it's from, as we used to say, the same part of the world. So, and if I sound anxious, it's because I don't, I feel a sort of ridiculous mixture of respectful and confused and I can't compete, but it's actually like all our dumb lives. You know, if something doesn't work, you find the nearest waterproof thing, and if it's got Vodafone written on it, you wouldn't even see it. So it's only because it's been made into an image that I could even attempt to speak like that. And I found it more or less by chance this morning. And I just wonder if, am I being difficult raising this, or am I re-emphasizing what it is that holds us together?
Well, Richard, you're always difficult.
I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, of course, but 1000% worth it. I mean, I think the word that we haven't used yet, which is the word that I first learned from you that day in 1987, is bricolage.
Did you all hear that? Bricolage?
Bricolage.
From the French.
And which kind of means do it yourself. It kind of means making do and getting by. But in France, what we call Home Depot or the do-it-yourself shop is called Monsieur Bricolage. But there's like a higher level of it. I mean, Claude Levi-Strauss uses it in the book where he talks about people who live in the jungle their whole lives and how they use different plants for medicine as a form of bricolage. That's, I think, the first use of it in academia. But that it says Vodafone, of course, that's such a like irony, beautiful, tragic, dystopic detail. To use a waterproof membrane out of a piece of obsolete advertising that will last 1,000 years, a vinyl tarp over a straw hut, speaks to some of the things that I'm interested in. Of course, it illuminates the structure of the political situation in that picture. But if we bring it back to the sculpture, it kind of illuminates, the pretension of my art, the awfulness of it. Like I have the ability to make fine Japanese wood joinery, but I use butt joints, because they tell the story more. I have the ability to build things perfectly, but I choose to tell the story. That's my privilege. My greatest maybe privilege in this is that I get to make milk crates out of plywood instead of plastic, because I've been to a plastic milk crate factory.
Tom, how important is it to you that the material that you're using is actually repurposed? That it's stuff that you found in a skip, or I don't know where you source your material?
Well, so Claire, I mean, that you're honing in really on my dirty little secret early on, but it started because I didn't have any money, so I would build things out of things that I found in a dumpster or skip. And then doing that for a dozen years, started to develop a language where the wood was always painted first because I found it, and then cut it so it would show the edge grain. Flash forward, a dozen or 20 years, I'm buying wood at the lumber yard in 4-foot by 8-foot sheets, the standard, painting them first and then cutting them. So, William Tucker talks about the language of sculpture and these words or phrases that we use to develop our language that make us have a concrete network of ideas or images, so you can tell the same person made the damn thing. Part of my lexicon is cut edge. And so some of this wood is found. It was from another thing, like some of these things were pedestals before they were sculptures. And some of them have prior lives, and I like to show those. But when I can't, we have these, these sort of like showing the screws always, and countersinking, and the resin repairs, and the pencil marks that you'll see on every single one of these things.
But it's important to you that you use a West epoxy resin. So you're using really good materials to bind these materials. You've got two elements of something that you're bringing together with a third. And I think that's the West epoxy, which has particular characteristics. So
the West system epoxy is made by the Gojan brothers somewhere in America, and it's like the global industrial standard of epoxy. They use it on spaceships in America's cup yachts. And if I have a break, I'll run and grab my 2-inch thick Gojan brothers textbook that has all the data about it and how to use it and how not to use it and tricks and formulas. But the one thing about West systems is nearly always painted over. Nearly, not always, but nearly always painted over. And I don't use it in the right way. But oh yeah, Rhodey, you're right there on that. The laundry basket, and you can zoom in on that laundry basket, and you can see exactly what Claire is talking about, that the West Systems epoxy is used to bind the fiberglass that's just used to bind the pieces of plywood. So that's that kind of yellowy tape. It's fiberglass tape that is tape.
Can I say something about the laundry basket?
Yeah.
Because I think this is the fourth time I've been in the show, and I think the laundry basket probably is the triumph of the show. And of course, I suffer from making rather quick, you know, I'm not a member of not like, but I soon know what I quite like. So the first time I saw it, it got under my skin. So I've had time to think about it. And I've then seen it again and again. So partly it's probably that I don't know whether this is probably a sexual term, it self-worries. So it throws its own shadow on itself. So it already deals with fall of light, and in quite a surprising way, but then of course shadows are always surprising. And it's also one of those things that, you know, we're in a room full of people. I bet everybody in here has got letters after their name, which doesn't follow that they're educated, but conventionally it means they're very highly educated. And I would guess that maybe only a quarter of them have ever seen a laundry basket making injection molding machine. And I have to admit, I am a bit educated and I have never seen a laundry basket molding machine, but I'm absolutely sure that in a kind of school game, we could all find the seam. We could sort of work out what molding is, and we could talk about making cakes and even the sensation of putting your foot into a rubber boot. There's all sorts of, perhaps I shouldn't go any further with that, but there are all sorts of models in our lives which do actually tell us how things are made, but we've become a bit stupid and we know less and less for sure. So my point would be that the labor, the incredible levels of embedded labor in your laundry basket possibly is an approximation to the first fake laundry basket, because I did bring my new word with me, which is it's a skeuomorph, which I'll think we have talked about before, but it looks like something that it's not. So laundry baskets were woven, French panier, I wonder why, P-A-N, oh yeah, you keep the bread in there, etc., etc. So you're on a sort of linguistic riot making this. So now I've said too much. Did you know that when you started making it? Because I think if I'd made even 2 of the panels, I'd have got really pissed off. And maybe you didn't do all the drilling. So can you talk a little bit about the point at which the conceit of doing it collides with the dumb act of, we've got to keep going? What is it, you know, there are a lot of questions in the show about how things sit. There's an awful lot of this way up. Things are, it's pretty upright. It sort of looks slightly naughty, like it might fall off. And we could name a few artists who are good at fall off. Awful.
So,
I finished.
Okay, Rhodey, so if you just keep going around the edge, so you can see this, keep going, moving around, so you can see all the pencil marks on the edge, the outer edge. Yeah, stop. I mean, this thing, stop, just hold it there. Yeah, oh, so you can see the epoxy resin, that translucent goo between the gaps. I mean, a proper woodworker would have curved those sheets of plywood or would have made a wedge or something, but spackle and paint make me the welder I ain't. And epoxy resin is woodworkers' equivalent of that. I think it starts as a simple idea, but then all those hours of labor that get poured into it are the thing that they can't take away from me. You can say what you want, whether this is pretentious art or not, but you can never take away the hours that I put into it. And that, for me, is the motivation. I'm making this stuff for me and my community, which includes everyone in the studio that helped me make it, and includes you, Claire, Richard, and everyone here in the audience, because you haven't walked out of the room. You care enough about this sculpture and this conversation that you're staying. You could leave, but that it's interesting enough to you means that we're talking about it. And for me, all of those hours that are poured into making something like this is my athletic training. It's like a basketball player doing free throws, or a football player practicing or running. Those are all the things that make me like a fully optimized athletic artist. And sure, it's not running up and down a football pitch, but it's athletic and requires skill and patience and precision. And when we talk about working with a team, because there are 20 people in my studio,
we hold the picture there.
There's teaching.
I didn't mean to. It's such a weird way of. The most exciting thing about COVID is that we breathe each other's spittle. And what's the most boring thing about Zoom is that I'm not breathing your spittle and you're not breathing mine. So we're not going to get ill, but it's so tiring because it's not we have to construct the conversation, which I think is actually a metaphor for everything you've just been saying. And I think what you just said was, you should get that written up. Maybe, of course, you wrote it already and you read it out, but it's very, it's nice hearing somebody talk about labor in that way. So I want to say one little sort of slightly boring thing, which Dan Cruikshank, who you probably don't know, but Dan Cruikshank would be the person to discuss. If you go right onto the edge, onto the lip, camera person. Go closer, 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 closer. So all these little notchy things you can see here, I can't tell you what year that was invented, but if you've ever seen a decent staircase or a bit of skirting where a piece of timber miraculously goes round a corner, that's because somebody you never met cut the back of the timber like that, and then you can make a solid piece of timber go around the corner. You see it in the bottom of even shitty London.
Those people are always dead. They're dead people?
They always, yes.
They're not alive anymore.
But we talk a lot about the dead. So I wanted to just point out that that language is in this building, which is why that shot with the door, which is probably made by an illiterate boy, is quite, to me, is quite affecting. And for those of you who know who David Pye is, David Pye could talk about that for a week. Could
Genevieve
we go?
Hansen always said that the things that I like that are made that are old out of brass were made by people whose teeth hurt them their whole lives.
I'm really sorry, I couldn't get that.
Am I not loud? Can I be turned up louder? Can you guys hear me?
No, either I'm going deaf or the sound is a bit odd. No, it doesn't matter.
Can I just interject? Tom, you were talking about labour, and this exhibition is called Ritual, and in some senses that ritual is around work, the necessity to work, the what that gives to you, what that brings to you, what the creation of these works means to you. It's not really, it's a will, it's not really a will, it's a necessity, it's a compulsion. And I just wondered if you could say a little bit about that compulsion to make, that compulsion to bring work, to bring objects into the world, into a world which is already heavily laden with objects.
So I'm a little concerned that I'm not loud enough. I have no sense of that. So, but I'll try.
I thought it was interesting because you actually started this talking about sort of Upper Paleolithic. You were talking about you know, 35,000 years ago, we started to make objects, we started to create art.
50,000.
Well, now we think, yeah, 51,000.
Yesterday it went up.
Yeah. And, you know, it seems to me that what we're talking about is something that's hardwired, and what we're looking at downstairs is the results of that, you know, very, very, very many eons of the compulsion to work, the compulsion to create something and bring it into the world.
Well, I think I would go continue where I was talking about my athletic ability. You know, if a professional soccer player is good at kicking the ball into the net and running around and stuff, I'm really good at making the stuff that shows how it's made. And my greatest joy and privilege is that I get to show up and work every day and exercise my ability to make stuff, and also to teach, because in my team there are 20 people and we work together, so there's teaching, and we're kind of like a team. I may be like the coach or the striker or something, but the thing that is most meaningful for me is the sensual experience of cutting and drilling and screwing wood or painting it first, all the steps, every single part, because there is a sort of sensuality to taking a pigment and making a canvas a color. Like if you're looking at this red cube here, that was really gratifying making that red. And I know these are kind of simple pleasures. They're maybe not sophisticated. I don't really care if how people view what I do. I care immensely the dialogue that I have with you, Claire, and Richard, that we talk about, that we think it's interesting. And the thing that I do on a Sunday is cut wood and assemble it, and burn my fingertips with a hot glue gun, not on purpose, but because I'm getting so close to the material. Like if you look at this Tide bottle here, this is made out of cardboard, and the letters are cut with a scalpel and then torn off to relieve beneath, and then the letters are burned in with an electrically powered pyrography knife. Super precise.
This might, how much longer have we got? Because I'm a bit unclear about the great axe. Somebody tell me?
We've got about 10 minutes.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll go very quickly. I wonder if this shouldn't be lying on its side, because really it's a Henry Moore.
Yeah.
And everything you say about how they're made is in a way very like the Henry Moores I made when I worked there, which was the summer of Sergeant Pepper, the first heart transplant, I think the invention of BBC Two for people here long, long ago. But the thing that we were doing was we were actually faking Henry Moores. So we were making hollow volumes from a maquette, which of course I dropped, and it looked much more interesting when I mended it, because it then looked like it was made of travertine. And he never said anything about it. I always thought that was incredibly gracious, because of course it was stupid of me to have dropped it. But we would have to point them up and make them bigger. And then to make them look like art, we had to use a cheese grater to work the surface. And you can see that in late 60s Henry Moores. You see it from about the middle of the 60s. And I think actually it's what the book, what's he called? William Tucker's book is sort of edging around. He's getting very nervous about, you know, that Moore is no longer carving or whatever. I want to join that little bit of me being personal up with, I made a little list of Americans in London, and they, on the whole, they don't stop. They're here for a short time. And I was thinking, I regret this terribly, that we didn't ask Doris Lockhart to be here, because she came to London in '65. And I think the city probably owes her a basket full of intelligence. But Epstein was here, and I actually think your leaf blower is much more like the rock drill than anything else. And I think that the rock drill is an extremely un-English sculpture. And then the other people who come to mind are people who Robert Fraser, I think, invited. So Jim Dine was here for quite a long time, and so was Claes Oldenburg. And so the Oldenburg was here in, I think, 66, 65, 66, 67, and probably is the person who pressed the greatest number of buttons for me about what is possible near or around art. And years later, he told me this term, inventor-artist, or artist-inventor. And I think I'm right that your studio building is actually Edison's building, but you then cheekily wrote Brancusi on the door. So taking that run of stuff, Americans in London, what they did, what they got from it, what they gave to it, joined up with your inventor-artist. You're an inventor-artist, so back to you.
Yeah, I share Oldenburg's influence in so many ways, not just in his reinterpretation of things, but like he made things that he wanted to have. That's all I do. You know, he made humble things, and he made humble things great. And you know, I always started. For me, it was like my own kind of cargo cultism, where I wanted status things. Like I wanted, this is the cat carrier from Alien, but I didn't want a Hollywood replica. I wanted my own homemade version that I got to spend building and showing how it was made. And I wanted it to kill my cat who was dying of cancer, because I wanted to be involved in his passing to the next dimension. I didn't finish it in time, so we did what everyone else does. You know, we hired a professional cat killer to come over and send him off. But you know, whether it's a Kelly bag or a Brancusi, or going back to the 90s when I made my own Mondrians out of duct tape, there were always things that I wanted. And for sure, Oldenburg's store and his manifesto, I Am Foreign Art, was kind of a manifesto that I took for instructions on how to start my studio, and continue with a lot of his thinking to this day. And I think the friendliness of his work is something that I always work hard to bring, to make sure that the stuff's accessible, because we have this ongoing conversation, and it's pretty esoteric talking about West systems and plywood, and it's not for everyone. But a lot of the people in this room know what a Kelly bag is, and there are probably one or two in there right now. And you know, I always wanted a Kelly bag, and I couldn't afford one, so I went to Hermes and I bought one on my credit card, traced it, made stencils, and returned it the next day, and then made my first one out of tape. Many years later, after making a few Kelly bags like the one here, one was sold in an exhibition, and I took the money and I went to Hermes and I bought my mom her first Kelly bag with that money, and she decided it was too heavy and gave it to my wife, who decided it was too matronly. So now I own the Kelly bag. And but the pleasure in it the whole way was just studying it. There's a idiom, you shouldn't get a Kelly bag before your 30th birthday, because then you'll have nowhere to go. You can't, like girls in their 20s aren't allowed to have Kelly bags, because what are you going to get? A crocodile Kelly bag like this one? Like spend triple the money? The same, like you shouldn't get a Porsche 911 before you're 40. These are all like the kind of scripture of the affluent and the aspirational. So I mean, that's all like political stuff behind the story, but for me, it's just about appreciating the thing, the heritage of this object, which was originally a mailman's bag, a larger version of it, and making it and passing it along. So there's no, in a way, I have my guilty consumerism, but I don't really possess much, because I make stuff and let it go through me. I'm not like a collector. I don't have stuff. I don't have I don't have a fancy car. I've got a van, a delivery van is my family car, and then the studio uses it very much like it's something not even as good of a one as this, but idea, yeah, it's just like making things that I want.
I have a horrible feeling that like on broadcast television, there's suddenly going to be credits going up. On Saturday morning, I woke very, very early and put on a TV, fell back to sleep and woke up. And they run, I think, end to end, maybe 4 Simpsons every Saturday morning. And I was sort of bathing in it. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, this is your alter ego. And I watched it as if we were like little boys sitting in our bed. You know, our parents have gone downstairs. And the quality of the writing, the quality of the imagery, the laminates, to stretch a point, the laminates of meaning, so that a 3-year-old would be laughing, but a 75-year-old who knows something about American or global politics would be weeping simultaneously. And I was thinking that maybe this is something we should do, because I did actually photograph a lot off the television sets. Go ahead.
So yes, as long as we're talking about seasons 1 through 10, I'm in a full agreement. There is a fantastic Instagram that you must check out called Simpsons Landscapes, where it's just screen grabs. There are a dozen or more Simpsons Instagram collections where people go and take screen grabs, and it's like almost every frame is a painting in seasons 1 through 10. And I think there's a lot in there that it was definitely my postgraduate work. When all my friends were at graduate school, I watched The Simpsons from 1989 to basically 2001, September 11th, 2001, because when the World Trade Center came down, so did my reception. And you had to get cable TV in New York City after that. So I stopped watching it. And it's about when it stopped being good. So, but yeah,
Tom, Richard has introduced The Simpsons, and in a way introduced America into this. And, you know, we can talk about the Europeans in America. So I'm thinking, obviously, particularly Brancusi and Duchamp. And, you know, I don't know what impact that has on you, that you're appropriating a way of making sculpture, a way of thinking about sculpture. But it's also, you know, Brancusi never had a solo show in France in his lifetime, only ever in the United States. His collectors were in the United States, as we know. So the same applies to Duchamp. That's why Philadelphia has such a huge collection.
It's where Duchamp's suitcase went.
And I think, you know, also, yeah.
The Bible.
I don't know. You maybe this isn't something you're so aware of, but this, you know, this importance of their voices in America. Obviously, you have David Smith. You were at Bennington. Clement Greenberg was at Bennington. You know, arguably, David Smith was the first kind of true American sculptor, kind of born and bred, coming out of the Midwest. And, you know, how much of that sort of forms part of your thinking?
Can I just say a short thing in the gap, which is Catherine Lampert said to me, David Smith couldn't read French, got cahiers d'art, looked at the pictures. Tom.
Wow. Yeah, well, I don't know how to say this in a poetic way, but I'm fairly certain that the thing that we all love about Americans globally is their cluelessness. Like, Americans like don't know what's going on culturally, but somehow do all the best stuff, right? Like, all the best art of the 20th century is either American or derived from American art, right? Like the art of the African diaspora maybe is best exploited through the Beatles, but you know, you've got Motown and James Brown and the whole history of the music from Africa. But like when I think about pop culture stuff, like even someone like Andy Warhol, there's like an innocence and naivete that I think translates. But this is me as a critic. And if you're to go specifically to your question, like I always identify more with European and Japanese values in the way I make my things. Those are the things that I aspire to because they're done with such care. Like the irreverence of the American, like if you look up at the ceiling, I remember Tadeus once walked in here because I've got these beautiful 19th century like stamped iron ceilings, and you can't really see it, but it's a horrible tube of, okay, you can kind of see it up there. There's like a duct. There's a giant air conditioning duct. And he walked in one day, he hadn't been here in a few months, and he walked in and he said, "You Americans are so irreverent. You just put a giant duct in the middle of your space because you want air conditioning. Like you don't like, it's like you don't give a shit." And I think that that's 1000% true. There is a like, we don't care what it takes, just beat the Russians by putting a man on the moon. And then you get this, like the greatest art project ever, like a military scale art project, man on the moon. And that, you know, whether that's that or a monster truck or a pair of Air Jordans, like the dedication to the extreme realization of absurd goals is something that I take to my small shop meaningfully. Like we go far. Like this, the seams, the corrugated structure of this milk crate are rendered in super fine plywood that they use to build airplanes. We found a place that makes plywood that's so it's like 1/8 of an inch, and it's five ply. Crazy, that stuff. Like, why would you need to do that? Because you got to go all the way. And I think that's why, like when we look at the Anthropocene, you know, it's the age of the American. The age of America, the ultimate product of the Enlightenment, whether, you know, sure, we're destroying the planet, and these are some of the interesting things that come along with it.
I can slightly feel, I don't know what it is I'm feeling, but I've got the feeling that there's somebody's going to come in and stop this. So I want to say a couple of things that I would say to you normally. We have something, if you want to pin something up in actually, of course, we're in England, damn it. In England, if you want to pin something
Lucky.
up, you go and buy something called drawing pins. And I went for a walk, especially for you, to look for skeuomorphs. And I'm not actually that kind of researcher, but I get lucky if I go for a walk. And I found these, which I don't know whether the camera, is that being conveyed somehow?
Let's zoom in and see.
Do I get handed to somebody else? Okay. So we'll put these in the post to you.
Thank you.
But these are the, somebody is it?
Oh, yes, those are skeuomorphs, right? They look like push pins, but they're magnets.
Right. So, I mean, how weird, I was going to swear. I mean, really, how weird is it that these are push pins and it's childhood, you know, you can play endlessly with these little magnets so the push pins actually push away from each other because they've got nothing to do with push pins or drawing pins because they've got a magnet in them. And in a funny way, I think that's the kind of juice that's running through everything that you do. I'm sure you have put magnets in things.
We use magnets. Well, these new neodymium magnets are so wonderful. The new powerful little super magnets. Probably what's in those. Neodymium.
I can't hear you well enough. I'm so sorry. Could you finish by just saying what is going on in the little, the tiny little bottle rack, which is sort of sort of insanely small and has got various little clues drawn in the bottom that mentions Rauschenberg, and there's something odd going on there.
So just a little history. I made a sculpture of the bottle rack that Duchamp sold to Rauschenberg for 50 cents. So it has the Rauschenberg Foundation little piece of hockey tape that's typed with a serial number on it. It's got an inscription in French that Duchamp wrote, probably not to Rauschenberg, but possibly it was the title of the piece. I'm not really even sure, but I just did it as exactly as I could. So those inscriptions are as like authentic as marks and other flaws that I was able to find. Probably worth noting is that this is the fiberglass rings. If you look from the top, looking straight down, it's plywood, but I didn't think it would be strong enough to, well, maybe not from all the way to the top because you probably can't reach, but like just look straight down. Yeah, okay. So there's like a little piece of fiberglass cast or clamped into the middle. So there's, in the ply, there are a couple layers of wood and a couple layers of fiberglass too for strength. You can see them from the top. And those rivets are skeuomorphic rivets. They're not holding it together. They're just in the right place. So that's a form of skeuomorphism. Although I think to do it right, you would send it all the way through. I don't think we needed to, so we did.
Tom, the earliest work in this show is the Barbie from 2015. I don't know if that's, I guess it's not exactly the first, but it's a starting point. Is this a series of work which will never end? Is this a developing body that will go on and on and on?
Yeah, I mean, I think this show is sort of my best show I've ever done in a sense, because these are kind of nuggets. This Barbie I've shown a couple of times. She's part of my collection, and this is kind of the story of me loving Barbie. And my parents bought me my own Barbie because I was always playing with my sister's Barbie, and I think maybe were a little concerned about how obsessed a little boy being obsessed with a Barbie instead of being obsessed with fire trucks. But I think that they learned eventually that I wasn't in love with Barbie, but it was more lust, because I think I was from a very young age, like, saw her as like a sexual fetish of her, like, wanting her. And someday when you meet Sarah, you'll see that there's a lot of things about her form that look like my wife, like, and that her hair is those are Vectran strands that I got from Jet Propulsion Laboratory when I was working there, and her legs and body, and even her wing nut. These are all ways of me like spending time kind of obsessing with a form that is meaningful to me emotionally. So this is like maybe the best example of sympathetic magic. This works a lot of the same ways that a lot of other fetishes from like West Africa work, where it's about praying to the a fertility fetish, male or female. So this is in a way something that's about those kind of earthly desires and ambitions and needs and reproductive rights or whatever, but also like spending time with what I do best, which is make sculpture, and applying those skills to something that's more fundamental to the human survival.
So that actually already sets up your next show, and I won't be here, but Marina Warner will, and you should do it with Marina, because what you just said is she can do that for 50,000 years. She can talk about that for 50. I don't mean she would talk about it, sorry. You knew what I meant.
Yeah. But I would say, Claire, that this is an ongoing body of work. I am working on this right now. I'm making other work that could be in this show. They're not done right now. I'm in the middle of them, but this kind of working where I show how the thing's made. I'm making objects that have meaning to me. Like this ice machine is outside of every 24-hour deli in New York City, and they're accompanied by surveillance cameras. And there are like these herms or road markers or totems on the side of symbols of power and symbols of disdain for nature in a lot of ways, because there's nothing like air conditioning and ice to say, fuck you, Mother Nature, we're going to bring our ice all over the world. And there's nothing like the panopticon to keep us all on our toes. So, you know, I'm not saying that this isn't like a beautiful thing. This is kind of like a toxic thing in my life, but it's something that serves us. It keeps us, you know, Foucault says it's not that you're being watched, but that you might be being watched that keeps people in mind. And formally, it's a Brancusi. Like these forms, surveillance cameras are two kinds. Ones that say, hey, I'm a surveillance camera, to let people know they're being watched, and others that are just hidden around in secret spots so that you could be watched. When I do surveillance, I always separate them so that this form of surveillance, the housing is in a different place than the actual camera.
Tom, we're going to have to come to a close. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Richard. Was that hard?
Yes.
Was that intense?
Tom, thank you. You look absolutely, you seldom look tired, but maybe it's the screen. No, I think it's incredible. I think what we're doing is really, really strangely demanding. I think it's really odd to form a sentence and then hand it over. And it's like passing passports to each other.
Well,
I miss
Richard,
you.
I miss you too, and I'm so honored that you were here to share, and you've taught me and continue to teach so much. And I know it's hard with these time constraints, but I so appreciate your dedication to this conversation that would continue for many years. And Claire, I hope that this is the beginning of many more conversations where we can dig into all the issues. I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Me too. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. 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 I gotta press leave now. Bye. Bye, Polly.
I don't know how you finish a thing like this.
Maybe it's a moment for me just to sort of wrap up and say how fantastic it is to have listened to three of you talking. And these kind of occasions are all the more precious given the strange world in which we live. And to hear Tom talking about the show downstairs, which is just so important, is a privilege, as it is to listen to all of you. So thank you very, very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you all for coming. Let's not meet like this more.